Sports are famous for their rivalries. Messi versus Ronaldo, Senna versus Prost, and LeBron James against the bouncy ball. I don't know anything about basketball, I'm sorry. But the world of Formula One operates differently to other sports. Sometimes your teammate can also be your greatest rival. We've seen that throughout 2025 with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The counter effect of that is that sometimes drivers at other teams can be your allies. And so I decided to research how every single driver feels about every other driver, map it out, and see what the unexpected alliances of Formula One are. Let's first have a look at one of the most consistently controversial groups in Formula One, whether it's because their old boss won't stop sending me voice notes that sound like this,
show me you Willie!
An old man keeps shouting at clouds, or because Yuki Tsunoda can't see over the steering wheel. The Red Bull F1 group always seem to be in the news. So given the fact that they have 2 teams in the sport, and more drivers on the grid have come from the Red Bull Junior program than any other program in Formula One, you'd think the Red Bull family of drivers would be relatively close. But that's not the case. Starting with Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon, who have both partnered Max Verstappen and both been fired for not being quick enough, seem to offer a lot of support to Racing Bulls drivers, with Lawson receiving some extra support from both in the media after Helmut Marko deemed he was too useless to drive in the big boy team. Then in terms of Isaac Hadjar, him and Pierre Gasly have actually been spotted watching football together, so that French bond really goes a long way. They can both go on strike at the same time. You might think, given the fact he's beaten almost all of them, the Red Bull drivers wouldn't really like Max Verstappen, but it actually seems to be the opposite. Consistently, these drivers have praised how good Max is. Maybe Red Bull's just keeping them on the payroll to glaze Max Verstappen in the media, although the big man himself has actually offered support to both Liam and Yuki after their struggles in the main Red Bull team, as well as being incredibly close with Pierre Gasly, his former teammate, ever since childhood. There's only one real outlier in this whole scenario, and it's Yuki Tsunoda. We all know that for such a short person, Tsunoda has a big mouth.
We are good on tires, we need to cover for signs. Push, push.
Mate, I am! Look! I can't pushing more because there is a Alonso at me from.
And considering the sheer amount of pressure he's under, it makes sense he might be opening it and burning a couple bridges right now. Yuki probably isn't on amazing terms with Hadjar at the moment. Considering how good Hadjar's performances have been, he may as well be the one escorting Yuki out the door. But the real juicy beef is between Yuki and Liam. It's the worst kept secret in Formula One that those two are fighting for the last remaining Red Bull seat next year. And so the rivalry between the two has heated up.
Lawson is disturbing me in purpose.
With Tsunoda blowing up at Lawson, claiming he was impeding him at the US Grand Prix, and even claiming it wasn't the first time it's happened. The other outlier, who is technically in the Red Bull family, is Carlos Sainz, with him having some issues with Hadjar and Tsunoda, but especially Liam Lawson.
But get out of my way! I'm Liam Lawson!
If you've seen these two cross paths on track, you will know why, but given the fact Carlos was in the Red Bull program about 40 years ago at this point, we might as well exclude him from this section. Let's instead talk about one of the most Marmite drivers in Formula One, George Russell. As for most people, you either love him or you hate him. But the next group of driver alliances is going to be considered as Team Russell, and those who are relatively close to him. But before I do that, I've started a new YouTube channel called Crash Happy. It's where me and a couple other YouTubers, Mr. V, Formula Duck, Not Applicable, Mr. Pulse, do not just a weekly F1 podcast, but we also play some really fun games. If you enjoyed some of my previous gaming videos, you'll definitely enjoy this channel. We're trying to hit 10,000 subs by the end of the year, so if you could help us out, I would really appreciate it. So let's talk about Team Russell. Because while there are those that definitely dislike George, case in point Max Verstappen, who George had the most hilarious rant about.
Whenever anything is not going his way, he lashes out with unnecessary anger and borderline violence.
George definitely practiced that one in the shower. There's also Russell's beef with Lance Stroll, which stems all the way back from Formula 3 when Stroll basically paid off his teammates to not battle him on track, which was reported by none other than Inspector George himself. When Russell was looking for alternatives to Mercedes this year, you know, when the whole Max to Mercedes drama was happening, Aston Martin are rumored to have denied him purely because of this beef all the way back in Formula 3. That's how deep this goes. Despite those, Russell does have some friends. Lewis Hamilton still holds him in very high regard after their teammate battles. If you actually look hard enough, you can find pictures of young George Russell as a Lewis Hamilton fan when he was a kid. But surprisingly, Russell is also very close with Fernando Alonso. Considering Lewis and Fernando hate each other, that may be a bit of a shock. It's true though, multiple times Russell and Alonso have been seen partying together, and recently people spotted Fernando Alonso's phone case. And you may be wondering, Dan, why does Fernando Alonso's phone case matter? Well, because in that case was a picture of him and George Russell. Why? My game theory is that they're secret lovers. Apparently, it's actually just a picture of his niece, and Nando and Russell were in like a picture behind it. But I'm sure someone's writing the fan fictions as we speak. Obviously, Russell is kind of close with Lando and Albon, given they were that whole 2019 rookies group. But something tells me they're not like best friends. As I've brought him up, Fernando is now telling me I must mention him. I'm sorry guys, but he hurts me if I don't talk about him in videos. Seriously, I need help. Although, lucky for you, Team Fernando is one of the biggest alliances in Formula 1, with many drivers seeming to have a lot of respect for the two-time champion. I mean, obviously, Fernando has his enemies. He and Lewis Hamilton have been at each other's necks since 2007, and that's never going to change. Liam Lawson and Alonso also constantly fell out over 2024 in regards to Liam's on-track terrorism, which I think is now fair to say considering how many incidents Lawson gets involved in. And of course, there's the famous rivalry between Alonso and Esteban Ocon.
Esti on the podium, baby!
The nuclear fallout caused by these two at Alpine still hasn't settled. It's gotten so bad, the team has been run by a mutated gorilla. Sorry, no, that's actually just Flavio Briatore. But Fernando has some very powerful friends on the F1 grid, some that might actually surprise you. As mentioned, there's Russell, but also, surprisingly, there's Max Verstappen, with the two being quite close and sharing an interest in being 24-hour Le Mans teammates, as well as Alonso randomly becoming Verstappen's #1 glazer recently. So it may also surprise you that he's quite close with Lando Norris. Fernando actually gave Norris advice on the championship fight this year. So if Lando beats Oscar and Max, technically, it's all Fernando Alonso's doing. But their friendship does date quite far back. You've got to remember, Norris was a McLaren Junior working with Fernando, but the two of them were even teammates. Back at the 2018 24 Hours of Daytona, the two ran quite well, even got close to the lead at one point before mechanical issues caused them to DNF. Then there's Fernando's friends further down the grid. There's Lance Stroll, whose dad pays Alonso to say nice things about him in the media. And there's, of course, the rookie Gabriel Bortoleto, who's managed by Fernando and I would keep a close eye on because he's a bit of a rising star. Speaking of the rookies, they all have a common friend, Max Verstappen. He's made it his goal to support all of the rookies this year, something he felt he didn't get when he first joined F1. Max, that's probably because you made it your mission to crash into every single driver on the grid. But he's become especially close with Kimi Antonelli, despite the kamikaze taking him out in Austria.
Please don't kill us!
And also Gabriel Bortoleto, which makes sense given Max's prior friendship with Fernando. Verstappen has spoken positively about all of the rookies, although he did laugh at Ollie Behrman for this objectively hilarious crash in the UK Silverstone. And then with Colapinto, Max has made a couple criticisms, but initially spoke very well of Frank. In fact, Max actually has a bunch of friends on the grid. I mean, not Lewis Hamilton, 2021 did happen, and also not Esteban Ocon, because Brazil 2018 did happen. Leave a comment below if you would shove Esteban Ocon. Don't actually, but if you are down there, you might as well subscribe. It makes me happy. So while all the rookies might like Max, how do they feel about each other? Most of them seem relatively close, if not relatively neutral, considering F1 this year has bound them all together with media duties. But I'd assume there's a little bit of tension between Hadjar and Bortoleto after their F2 title fight. Then again, it was a relatively clean battle. I also assume Colapinto and Hadjar had a little bit of tension attention when Colapinto was being eyed up to take the Red Bull seat over him. Sorry, the Racing Balls seat. But then Colapinto went to the Logan Sargent School of the Williams second seat and just binned it in the wall. The two closest definitely seem to be Behrman and Bortoleto, which at one point apparently hated each other over an iRacing incident, which is valid. If someone tanks your safety rating, you should legally be allowed to break their kneecaps. Now though, the two consider each other as best friends. Good for them. Now let's put them in a title battle and break their spirits and make them never talk to each other ever again. Ollie Behrman is also close with Kimi Antonelli. Obviously, the two got along really well as teammates at Prema in F2, and Behrman actually advocated for Kimi to get an F1 seat. What's really funny is that despite both liking Behrman, Kimi and Bortoleto don't get along that well after Kimi put Gabriel in the wall in Monaco. Again, that's kind of fair enough, but at this point, it's probably water under the bridge. As we've already mentioned Isaac Hadjar quite a bit, let me quickly go over what I like to call Team France, and a few drivers who aren't French. As you can imagine, just like a motorway in Paris, it's a complete shit show. Pierre Gasly gets along well with Isaac, and he gets along well with Charles Leclerc. Look, the two of them are even at Wimbledon together. All three of those get along with Max and Lewis. Hadjar and Hamilton have become close, with Hamilton's dad even mentoring Hadjar. Pierre and Lewis have always got along fine, and despite being close rivals, Charles Leclerc and Lewis have a great teammate relationship. Lewis is even friends with another French driver, Esteban Ocon, with them bonding over their love for remote control cars. And now that I've brought up Esteban Ocon, Team France, and a few other drivers who aren't French, it very quickly falls apart. At best, these drivers ignore Esteban, with Esteban often praising Charles and Charles not even acknowledging him. Or again, Hadjar, who received praise for his podium from Ocon, and again, Hadjar's never acknowledged him. At worst, they hate him. Max Verstappen, as previously mentioned, doesn't like Ocon, and Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon literally have a lifelong feud. That all boiled over in 2024 and again left Alpine as a nuclear wasteland. That does explain why the car drives as if it is mutated. I'm sure you're here wondering about the championship leaders. The McLaren drivers. I bet people have some really strong opinions about those guys. No. Not really. Oscar Piastri is by far the most boring, which makes sense given his introverted vibes. He doesn't really seem to be close to anyone, but he also has no one he really hates either. Lando Norris is a little more interesting. Of course, there's his friendship with Alonso that I've already mentioned. And then how could I forget Carlando? He and Carlos are famously very good friends. Speaking of Carlando, for my research, I am choosing to subscribe to the Verstappen theories. Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen are enemies to lovers. No, I will not elaborate. Lando Norris also seems to hold Alex Albon quite close. Although George Russell was mixed in that relationship, I always get the feeling him and Russell don't get along quite as well. But that's because all three of them spent their junior careers basically together. Other than that, Lando doesn't really have many other close friends on the grid. It's a lot more interesting to look at a former friend. If you'd asked me a couple years ago, I'd have said Lando and Max Verstappen were very close. But over the past 2 seasons, that relationship has gone downhill rapidly. In Austria 2024, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris came together for the first time, but they vowed it wouldn't affect their friendship, they'd talk it out and smooth things over. In Singapore 2025, Verstappen became frustrated at Lando, claiming he purposely tried to throw him off in qualifying. Max then said he wasn't going to talk to Lando about the incident. So what has happened in between these 2 events? If you saw the body language during the Mexico GP podium, Verstappen sprays Lando on the back and Lando just keeps his back turned and sprays his performance engineer or whoever the McLaren person was on the podium. On track, Max has made life difficult for Norris, pushing him off in areas, racing him incredibly hard. I would personally argue he races Lando harder than he races some other people right now. Is this a bad thing? No. It makes sense you'd race your championship rivals a little harder than you would anyone else. And Norris is famously a bit more of a timid driver. In the media, though, I'd put the blame the other way. Lando loves to have a little moan. Just proof he's British, I guess. He even recently said he'd be as good a driver as Max if he'd been go-karting from his age, and if his dad was an F1 driver as well. I'm sorry, Lando, but you, of all people, using your upbringing as an excuse? Your dad is a billionaire. On the list of people who can complain about stuff, you fall behind a newborn baby. You could argue it's inevitable though. We very rarely see a relationship survive a championship battle. Like I mentioned, Rosberg and Hamilton. Childhood friends, gone in an instant. The only recent friendship I can think that survived the title battle was Vettel and Hamilton. Probably because Vettel spent most of the title fight facing the wrong way. If you want to be part of the Dan No Skill Alliance, you should subscribe.
No.
I make videos. Please check out today's sponsor. Thank you so much as well to the channel members. Your support really does go a long way, and I genuinely appreciate it. Some of these guys have been supporting me for months. They also get access to exclusive content. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week, and goodbye.